Good afternoon. My name is Muhib Beacon and I'm joined by Lisa Hannigan. We're very glad to have you here today. I'd like to begin by just introducing myself and CSCMP. What's great about CSCMP, we're an organization that's committed to learning about logistics, and we're an organization that looks to put on great events. We've got this big thing going on right now, which is COVID, and it's really changing a lot of the dynamic in the way in which we work. And because COVID is creating this issue for all of us, we have to revise ultimately what that looks like. For me, what we look to do here, we're going to see in the logistics space, how do we address what's going on with COVID, and how do we address what jobs are great targets for moving to remote work, and how does that all look? So without further ado, please, Lisa, tell us all about yourself.
Much for allowing me to join you this evening, and for those of you joining live, thank you so much for spending some time with me. And speaking of which, so I know that most of us have had a pretty long work day, and just before we get started, I always like to kind of give us a little bit of energy, because we are going to be spending about 30 minutes together, just kind of chatting and talking about this great subject. And that was a great introduction. Thank you very much, Muhib, for just kind of leading us into the topic that we have today, because it really is an important one. Just kind of give us a little bit of energy, because most of us have probably been sitting for a lot of the day. So I always like to do something, and it might be kind of silly to you, but just take a second, like 10, 15 seconds, and I want you to get up, and I know this is going to seem kind of crazy, but just get up and run outside real quick, just kind of see what's going on in the world. So if you've been sitting in your chair all day long, and then you hopped onto this really quick, 10, 15 seconds, just run outside. And if you are watching the replay, do this too. Run outside, see what's going on in the world, and come back and type in the chat, what did you see? Is it raining outside? Did you see some little kids running around, happy to be home from school because school started? Just stretch for just a minute, just so that you can come back and be refreshed, and we can really talk about this subject today, because it's really important. So I'll give you 10, 15 seconds to kind of join me back here and in your seat. And like I said, whether you're joining us live or you're watching the replay, I think it's really good to kind of have a little energy as we talk about this important subject today. So I hope you saw something fun, something interesting. Maybe it's raining outside if you're in Jacksonville. That's all it's been doing here lately is rain, rain, rain. So let's go ahead and get onto this subject. So again, leading a remote workforce and how to transition teams to remote work. I really think this is super important. And we need to spend a little bit of time together sharing this. It's not that it's something new. A lot of us had people working remotely before COVID. So let's talk about this new reality. So we're 5 months in, and this has become this new normal. This is our new reality. I want to ask you a couple of questions. Where is your team? How are they adopting? And if you're not a leader, and even if you are a leader, you need to ask yourself, where are you? And how are you adopting? Now, I want you to hold on to those thoughts, and we're going to come back to these. We're going to address these questions at the end. As we go through this discussion, I want you to think about those questions. So if you're a leader, reflect upon yourself during this discussion, reflect upon your team. Now, if you're not a leader and you're joining us today, that's okay. These things that we're going to talk about are just as important to you as an individual part of a team, as you're part of a team. And you may be a leader one day having to lead a remote team. So definitely pay attention. But I want you to hold on to those answers, and we are going to revisit them at the end. So if you're joining us live, I want you to type in the chat, what are some of the benefits that you have personally experienced while working remote? Now, if you are a leader, what are some of the benefits that you've experienced with your team? What have you seen? What have they even possibly shared with you from working remote? I'll give you a couple of minutes, see what pops up in the chat. I know there's a little bit of a lag, so I'll only give a second or two. So I want to make sure we keep this conversation going. But also, for those of you joining the replay that might be watching this later on, I want you to think about some of those things. What are some of the benefits that you've experienced personally that maybe that you didn't think about? I know sometimes we thought, oh, this is going to be hard. But actually, remote workers are happier. We're not driving in traffic. I know for me, I hate to drive. So for me, I am so happy that I'm not having to commute. I used to live in Seattle at one point in time, which is way different traffic pattern than living here in Jacksonville. I know a lot of you joining us live or even watching the replay may live here in Jacksonville, but living in Seattle, I had to drive an hour and a half to work and 2 hours home. So even living here in Jacksonville, depending upon where you are, we're really spread out. Your drive could be 15 minutes or it could be an hour. It just depends upon where you are. So definitely that makes you happier. Saving time and money on your commute. You're not having to spend as much gas, your car maintenance. Time definitely is valuable. Everyone needs more time. So you're adding some time back in your day. And what about this one? Did you think about this one? Your environment that you're in is adjusted perfectly to you. So I don't know about you, but Jacksonville here is hot and humid during the summer. So you go outside. I've got this nice little short sleeve shirt on today. I feel great. But then I go in the office and I'm like, oh, I wish I would have brought my sweater. I'm freezing to death. So what are some of the things, some of the benefits that maybe you've seen? So Mohib, what are some of the things that they're sharing with us in the chat?
So I see that we've got a couple people here in the chat. Christy says more family time. Bethany says, I feel more productive because I'm not driving an hour to work and back. I'm more energetic and able to really focus on what I need to get down. I'm also eating breakfast, which is great. Me too, Bethany. Actually, I've been able to eat breakfast every single time, and it's more than an Ensure and a Mountain Dew out the door. And then I saw one person who withheld their name but said that they haven't worked remote, but a few folks who did were productive. So those are just some of the comments that I'm seeing coming through right now.
I love it. And I love that word productive. So definitely a good word to use. And that was my next topic. So healthier. So believe it or not, even though you may not be someone who likes to work out all the time, but you are healthier when you're at home. So think about it. You're not exposed to your coworkers in the office who might be bringing in some added germs that maybe if you were at home, you're not necessarily picking up. So some of us have children that go to daycare or go to school and they're exposed to extra germs that you're then bringing to your coworkers at the office. You're not probably tempted to eat out as much. You're probably going to grab a healthier snack. You're not going to go to the vending machine. So you're healthier. So a quote by Lucy Soros, she's the president of Articulate. She says, as the leader of a human-centered organization, knowing that remote work is good for our employees is intensely gratifying to me. It also has business benefits. Happy employees are more engaged, more productive, and more likely to stay at your company. Remote work can also foster high-performing and results-oriented workplace cultures. So there's that word productive. So you're exactly right. People are happy, healthy, engaged, productive, high-performing. So as a leader, this is what you want for your team. I don't know about you, but that sounds like some great benefits. So let's talk about this right now. Right? So we need to be very intentional about setting our team up for success. And this definitely involves a little planning. Some of these things you probably already did. Like I said, we're 5 months in, almost 6 months in. A lot of this you may have already experimented with, or you may have already been doing it with your in-person team, and you just kind of transitioned it a little bit and have made it work for you. And that's great. That's wonderful. But some of the things that we're going to talk about might be a little bit of a shift in a mindset for you. So I ask that you be open as I share these with you, but I promise they are a worthy investment for your organization, and they will help you create more engaged, happier, and productive employees. So are you ready? Let me hear you. Yes, in the chat. If you are joining us for the replay, I want a big hurrah from you still. Squirming in your seats as we get ready to talk about these shifts. Here we go. All right, this is the first one. I like to put it first because it screams noise for conversation, for a conversation starter. So tracking output, not hours. So this is our first shift. There's 5 of them that we're going to go through, and we're going to go through them really quick. I'm going to spend a little bit of time diving into some highlights on each. But we could talk about each of them and spend, quite a bit of conversation on all of them. But we only have about 35 minutes together today. So I only want to take a high level look at each of them. The goal is for you to think about these and to think about the shift of where you want to take your remote team and how, as a leader or being part of a remote team, how you can make these things work. So this is the first one. Be clear on priorities. We're going to talk about some communication tools, team growth, and then we're going to end with the human element. Of course, we're all people. This shift totally involves all of us working together. And as a leader, you may have fumbled through some of these things. You may have already done some of the things that we're about to go over. And there's been a lot of lessons learned. I mean, we've all had to experiment and grow and develop through this time. But let's go ahead and take a look at each of these shifts together. Muhib, do we have any comments or anything in the chat before I get started?
The only thing that I'm seeing here is that you got those loud yeses you were looking for.
Great. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about that first one that always gets everybody a little anxious. Stop tracking how much time their butts are in their seats. So what really matters is that they are producing good work. So are they collaborating well with others? Are they meeting their deadlines? So your job as a leader is not to police your workers. You've got plenty to do. Don't exhaust yourself with that. Now, granted, the output's going to look different for every single company. You might lead a customer support team. Maybe it's a call center and you actually have to have people sitting in their seats and they do need to be on the phones for a certain amount of time. I get that. Everything is going to look a little different and you just have to be a little flexible. But I guarantee that there is flexibility, and that if you take a look at it, maybe there's a little bit more there than you might initially think. So you just kind of have to focus on the results and what you want that end outcome to look like. And you're going to kind of find what the shift is and how you can make it work for you and your team. Because let's face it, being in front of this computer all day long is exhausting. And we're gonna touch on that as well, and what that looks like and why is it so exhausting. Be clear on priorities, setting crystal clear expectations for individuals and your team. All right, so your team, they already know what their job is. And I'm sure that you do some type of standard review, you have one-on-ones, whatever that might look like for you. But now, more than ever, is a time to over-communicate. Get your team involved, and more importantly, I know this may sound kind of silly, and I mean this kind of in a digital format, write it down. So share with everyone what their responsibilities are so that they truly know what their set expectations are within their role. And this may change a little bit. So get your team involved, have them meet together, and maybe work through what that looks like. Maybe it's changed a little bit. Maybe it had to evolve as you've worked through the last few months. Maybe you have to share some responsibilities. Maybe those roles morphed a little bit as we went through this remote work. I'm not sure. That's something that you have to look at as a leader and work through. But know what those expectations are, and have your team members know what they are. But letting them be involved with that process is very important. It really makes them feel connected more with the outcomes and more with what's going on. And then other things to think about when you're setting expectations. So work-life balance looks a little different for everybody. So think about, what do they actually need to come to you for approvals? You're the leader and they want to check in with you. They want to make sure that they're doing a good job. But do they need to come to you for everything? There's a lot in your day that you have to take care of as well. And they can't see you. You can't see them. But do they need to come to you for everything? Is this a micromanagement type style? Is it harder for you? Let's not make it harder for you, but let's not make it hard for them. So set those expectations up front. For example, school's back in session for most of us. I touched on that a moment ago. And maybe some of your team members want to take their children to school in the morning. So maybe instead of starting their day at 8:30, they'd like to start at 8:45. Or maybe they want to pick their child up from school and they want to take their lunch from 1:30 to 2:30 instead of 12 to 1, or whatever that might look like. Do they need to get that approved by you? Every day? Do they need to let you know, well, I'm going to lunch at 1:30 to 2:30, or do they just need to take a lunch hour and make sure that they're still producing the results that they need to, produce throughout the day? That's just one example, but be clear on what those expectations are. Don't make your day even harder than it needs to be, that they're having to check in with you every 10 minutes to get everything approved. Lead your team to success and be clear on what those expectations are. Communication tools. So I told you we're going to do a high-level review or a high-level look at each of these, but I do want to spend a couple minutes here because to me, and I'm sure you'll agree, this is a critical area. You have to be very intentional with how you communicate when you are working remotely. And nowhere is this more important than how we're using our communication tools. I've never had anyone say to me, I wish you wouldn't have shared so much information with me. That's not a statement I've ever heard. But it is important that we're using the right tools for the message. So what do I mean by this? And some of you might be laughing, and some of you may have already had this happen before. You're part of a team chat, or maybe you're on a chain, in an email chain, and all of a sudden you see it going back and forth way too many times. And you're like, what is going on? Why don't they just pick up the phone? Or why don't they just do a Zoom call? My rule of thumb is if it's more than one paragraph in a chat, or it takes more than 2 emails, then it's time to move on to another communication tool. I don't know about you. So if you want to share what your rule of thumb is, I'd love to hear some comments in the chat. I know that that's kind of my little pet peeve. If someone gets going back and forth, I wish they'd just kind of move on to something else. So we're going to do one more quick poll. So this one, and there's no right or wrong answer, so please don't think too hard about this. How frequently are you meeting as a team? So again, whether you're a leader or you're just part of a remote team, is it 1 day a week, 2 days per week, every day? What does that look like for you? How often are you asking your team to meet with you, or just in general as a remote team, how often are you meeting with your immediate team? So not all your meetings together, but just your immediate team. Muhib, can you share that poll?
So looking at those poll results right now, it looks like we've got 60% for 1 day a week, 20% for 2 days a week, and 20% for every day.
Okay. So 60% was for the once per week, right? Okay. Well, that sounds like a great cadence. So, like I said, that there's not any right or wrong with this. What the important thing is that there is a standard cadence going on. So I think once per week is great, is to kind of get caught up on what is everybody doing for the week. Some people do have to have daily meetings. So I shared with you earlier that I worked in Seattle for a period of time. And one of the things, as being an operations manager out there, I had a remote team that was totally in a different campus. And so we did have to have daily stand-ups, and it was very, operationally oriented. So we had to go over what every team was responsible for. So it really did need to be kind of a daily check-in for that. I was at a different location than what they were in. So we really needed to be very clear on who was doing what, who was responsible for what. But for right now, if you're on a team and you do a lot of the standard things every single day, that weekly check-in, kind of getting to talk to everybody to see how they're doing, I think that's a great cadence. But again, no right or wrong. And if you're watching the replay later on, just kind of think about what that looks for you. And as a leader, if you've established a good cadence with your team and it's working, and if you don't know if it's working, I highly recommend that you ask your team, how is it working? Do they feel like it is the right cadence? Is it too much? Is it too little? They'll tell you. So ask them, definitely. This brings me to, have you heard of the new term Zoom fatigue? This is a real thing. So whether or not you have Zoom as your conference platform or not, it definitely is a term that is being thrown around. So I'm going to have Muhib share with you an article. It's from the BBC. He'll share it in the link so you can see that. So whether you're live or watching the replay, I highly recommend that you read this article. And I'll just give you kind of a quick summary for us right now to know that what this is sharing with you is why you feel so exhausted at the end of the day from being on these conference calls all day. So you're already staring at this computer screen all the time. And now you're not just staring at it to do work, but now you have to stare at it to meet with people. Within the article, you'll learn why you are so exhausted by the end of the day from these Zoom meetings, because you're just staring at yourself, you're staring at everybody else, and it's hard to keep up with what's going on because we feel like we're always on. So I don't want to give away everything in the article, but it is definitely a short read, but it's a good one, and it might give you some insight on why you're feeling so tired. So take a look at that. I will say setting routine check-ins as a team is definitely a great way to communicate and to keep that cadence going and keep your team connected. But please don't just meet to meet. Have a purpose, make them productive, and then also as the leader, keep up with what else your team is doing. Be mindful of their other meetings. You know, we all have a lot of meetings. That has not changed. I think we actually might have more meetings than what we did in person now because everybody thinks that they need to meet and see each other more. I don't know why that is, but I feel like we have even more meetings now. But that could just be me. I don't know. If you are the leader, be on camera for your team meeting. Your team needs to see you. Try to also engage with them by calling on them and asking if they, want to share certain things. Some people aren't comfortable still, even though we've been doing this way of meeting, but definitely call on them, try to get them engaged, encourage your team to share. Have a purpose for each meeting, whether it's a brainstorm session for maybe a new product line, weekly check-in. If you're having a larger team meeting, and each person is maybe presenting on something different, just have a purpose and make sure it's an effective team meeting. And then also as a leader, it's important for you to help your team through other meetings. And so what I mean by this is let your team know that it's okay for some of their other meetings that are outside of your team meetings, that it's okay for them not to be on camera all the time. Now, you might have to help them understand and work through this, and maybe your company has a different policy, and I'll leave that up to you. But if they're not going to be leading or presenting in the meeting, to help minimize some of that fatigue that you'll read about in that article, let them turn their camera off every once in a while. It really does help. They can still hear, they can still participate, but it really is a true thing, this Zoom exhaustion, this Zoom fatigue. And then also remember, it's okay to have a little bit of a silence. I know we get a little nervous because of the technology and we think, oh my gosh, did something go wrong with the technology? Everybody's being quiet for a minute. But just like when we're in person, we still have to take time for reflection. We have to pause sometimes and think about what we're about to say or how we're going to respond. So it's okay to have silence, even in a virtual meeting, in a virtual environment. And this one's a big one. Whatever conference tool you're using, if your team is not familiar with it, help them with that. Especially if your team, if they present a lot or if they lead meetings a lot, make sure that they're comfortable with the technology that they're using. So for instance, if you have Zoom or you have WebEx, make sure they know how to use all the tools in there. So do they know how to share their screen properly or what not to share on their screen? Do they know how to mute? All of that. Make sure they're comfortable so that they're confident when they're representing their team in these meetings. Do I have any comments, Mohib?
A few comments that were a little more for something that would happen towards the end of the conversation. I'll share them now. How do you identify what jobs are great candidates for remote work? Another one, what kind of mindset helps people succeed remotely? So we had some of those.
Okay. Well, I think a couple of those. Let's try to save this towards the end. Because I think that probably we might answer a couple of those as we go through some of this other information. Okay, And then, so the last thing I want to touch on here for the communication part are just chat apps. So I don't know if everybody uses tools for chat apps at their organization, but if you are, I'd love to know what they are. So if you want to share those in the chat, I'm always interested in what people are using. And then if you're watching the replay, again, leave us a comment on what you're using as far as that goes. So for me, a quick answer, I'm not using my email for that. I want to use something like, Slack or MS Teams, or possibly some of you might have heard of Jabber. So just something quick. Maybe save that email for a more formal communication, a need to know for external teams, or maybe outside communications. But whatever you're choosing, whether it's it's this chat app, or if you're using meeting platforms or a more formalized cloud-based system, whatever it is, define those essential channels. So as a leader, get with your team, decide how you're going to communicate and what tool you're going to use for each type of communication. I'll say that again, what tool you're going to use for each type of communication. That's really important. So that way your team is not, waiting for an answer in email all day long from one of their immediate team members when they could have just sent a quick little chat and they would have gotten a response right away. So really important. And then you as the leader, you just need to be transparent. It's even more essential during this time. Be transparent, be there for your team, and communicate, make that policy, the door is always open, make it, it's wide open, even bigger than it ever was before. So next shift, team growth. So of course, I'm a little biased when it comes to this one because learning and development is my passion, but this shift has to be on your list. You may have to rethink a little bit about what training means to you or to your organization. And what I mean by this is, do you compliance type courses? So right now, if that's all that is, it has been kind of part of growth and development for your organization, that's okay. But during this time of remote work, what I will say is that you need to maybe think about going a little bit further. So start with making learning part of your team dynamic. And that is just a little step, one that you can take easily. Share an article or maybe a new tool that you found to use to make your life easier at home. One thing that I like to do, I like to listen to podcasts. And so one of my new faves is The Corner Office. So this is with Laura Vanderkam. So I'm going to have Muhib share the link to it if any of y'all are interested or like to listen to podcasts. She shares quick tips every morning. So it's like less than a 2-minute listen. So she helps listeners succeed in the modern workplace. And this is what she says: it's where ideas matters more than ever, but shoes may be optional. So I love that. I think you'll like it. If you're a podcast listener, she's fun. And like I said, it's really quick, nice way to start your day. If you like to do something a little bit more formal, you can share a webinar link, have your team attend it together as a lunch and learn, or maybe watch it and then talk about it during a lunch and learn. There's lots of things that you can do to help your team grow during this time, and that helps to keep them feeling connected. And then if you want to move on to big ticket items, something a little bit more challenging, transition your in-person training to virtual. Yeah, you heard me. Painting still has to happen, and it's an essential part of keeping your people in tune with your organization. I mean, you might be saying, hey, Lisa, we don't have a dedicated learning and development team. This is a lot. That's okay. You don't have to have a dedicated team. You have your people. They're your experts. We call them SMEs, subject matter experts. Assign them some training in small groups. Let them make something that your team can benefit from or your organization can benefit from. Take a new process maybe that you had to put in place for this remote work and turn that into something that can become a new policy, something that they train your organization on. It can be something just like that. Or maybe you want to take it a little step further, use some prepackaged content. There's a lot of great companies out there, LinkedIn Learning, Skillsoft. They've got great already prepackaged content, all kinds of different types of skills. So vary your options on what is out there, depending upon your size of the organization and what it is that you want to do. Or you could hire a consultant, maybe someone to be more personal within your team or within your organization to really take a look at what you need and where you want to go. So there's a lot of choices out there. Our last element is that human element. So like I said at the beginning, This is connecting all the pieces together and just remembering that we're all people. Making yourself available as a leader has never been more important than during this time. People are starting to feel isolated. They feel out of touch, and you have to keep your team feeling connected. And there's lots of ways to do that. We've talked about these shifts and just kind of trying to do some of these or all of these, whatever that approach might be. Maybe you've done these already. And if you have, kudos to you. That is awesome. Your team is shooting it out of the ballpark. That's wonderful. And just understand that some of these adjustments that you're making, they're not all going to look the same for everyone. We're all unique individuals. We all have different environments at our home. Some people live with roommates. Some people have children, and you may have hired a new teammate during this. This person is definitely challenged with trying to connect with your team. Hopefully you've had some opportunities maybe to do some team building activities to really bring that person into the mix. There's all kinds of shifts that factor into this human element. And all of these wrap up and end with people. So like I shared with you, setting clear expectations, knowing that it's okay to be human during all of this. We're not all going to work exactly the same. And then just being there for your people, working with them individually and as a team, and setting them all up for success. So remember the questions I asked you at the beginning. I want you to think about your answers based on what I've shared with you today. So I think that you're going to find over the past 5 months that your team and you have learned a lot and grown through this unique time together. My goal today was for you to take away something that you might not have thought about yet or haven't had time to try. The goal for you as a leader is for you to help your team to feel like a team and to be successful at whatever it is that your organization does. So thank you for allowing me to share time with you this evening. Please definitely reach out to me if you have any learning and development needs. I always love making new connections, and you can find me on LinkedIn. And I want to touch on any questions that we might have had that we didn't cover during the presentation. So Muhib, if we have a couple of questions that you mentioned, we could go back to those. I'd love to try to answer those.
Of course. So we got a couple great questions. One of the first questions I saw here was, how do you feel about hybrid schedules, mixing work from home and in-person office work?
Oh, okay. Well, I think now a lot of people are converting back to that. So people are feeling more comfortable with returning back to the office, and hybrid. I've heard a lot more about hybrid work schedules, and I think that if you're comfortable with doing that at your organization, that's a great way to get your people feeling connected again. And to really start to build up that team dynamic. And being flexible and still allowing some people to still work remotely, especially because we are still transitioning. Not everything is open up, and allowing some flexibility for some of your team members that might still need you.
Awesome. And then what kind of mindset? So I think some of these people are looking for who maybe should they be hiring? What kind of mindset is going to be the most successful here in this transition?
Right. Well, I don't think that you can label a particular mindset. I think that anyone is capable of working remotely if they're with the right team and they're coached and given the right opportunity to learn what's expected of them and how to do this. Now, I'm not going to say that there's not exceptions. There could be some people that just won't adjust and don't adapt well. Some people do work better when they are, in a face-to-face environment. But I think as a leader, if you learn to communicate with that person and really learn what is their communication style, how can you make them feel connected? How can you ensure that they understand their role and their responsibilities? And what is their work style? What's going to help them work well if they need to be a remote worker? I think that people can learn those skills, but we can't assume that they know what they are. And just because now all of a sudden we're working remotely, that everybody knows how to do this.
That's fair. How would you coach someone who's having trouble getting into that mindset?
Well, again, I think first it starts with understanding their communication style. Some people are, very outgoing, and some people need extra time spent with them. So some people they just need to be told what to do. And as long as they know what to do and they have clear direction, they'll run with it. There's a lot of assessments out there that can help you learn about people's communication styles. There's DISC assessments, DISC. There's a lot of different assessments out there, so you can look those up online and learn about people's communication styles. So that's definitely one way that can help you then translate that into how you can help them learn how to work properly and to learn the proper skills for you to be able to work well with them.
Now, I think you mentioned this earlier. They were talking, how do you connect teams? You mentioned a little bit about using work like Jabber or something like that to have some instant messaging. I think most organizations do. But do you have any other strategies to connect teams that you didn't maybe mention earlier?
Well, we didn't spend a lot of time on team building activities, and to me, I feel like we overlook those opportunities, and they don't have to just be fun things. I feel like doing team building activities can really actually build a lot of other skills. You can do brainstorming sessions together and really build out things that will help with critical thinking skills. I think it's something that we overlook. You can design activities that are around strategizing as well. So I feel like that's a great way to connect. I guess it depends upon what it is that you're talking about. If you're just talking about doing a quick chat, that's a fun way. But I think that we can use the communication tools that we have to set up other things. I know a lot of companies have been doing virtual chats to do coffee chats and virtual lunches and different things like that. So I'm not sure if I'm answering that question properly or not, but I hope that helps.
Of course. And are we expecting a shift back from remote work? I mean, I guess that's more on the purview of the person leading the team, but what's your feeling in terms of the trend?
Well, I'm seeing a blend. I really am. I think some people are still a little hesitant, and I think also people are trying to respond to their workforce because, you do have people that have, higher risk people at home, and that you can't take that lightly. And I think if you are a leader and you care about your team, you want to have your team feeling comfortable with coming back to work. You don't want them to be there and feeling nervous about, every day coming to work. Are they going to take something home to a loved one? For instance, maybe they have an elderly parent that they're taking care of at home, and every day it's a risk that they might bring something home to them. That's just one example. You want to make sure your team's comfortable every day. And if they're going to be more comfortable at home because of that exposure, then is there a reason why they have to come to the office? So it's just something to kind of ask yourself and to ask your organization and see, there's been a lot of organizations that have actually been pleasantly surprised at how well this has worked. And they are changing the way they look at remote work, and they have kind of revisited, how are we going to work? Are we going to allow for more of a hybrid schedule and allow for more flexibility? And I really think that is the way of the future. And I think it is more appealing and attractive to a lot more of the workforce.
Did you have anything else you wanted to say, Lisa?
No, just thank you again for allowing me to share with your organization. I appreciate it.
Thank you.